Hello and welcome to Pluck That. I'm Nick Ciraldo and I'm joined as always by Mike Boyd and Jonathan Bass. This is episode 8 of our humble podcast. And a little bit later, we're going to be interviewing luthier Joshia de Jonge, one of the world's preeminent guitar builders of classical guitars. We have a really excellent conversation with her, learning about her guitars, her craft, and more. First, we're going to take a little bit of time with the trio here, catch up a bit, and cover some news.
Anyway,
Bass, you got some news?
yeah, I got some news. I have had this GNL ASAT special that you can possibly see behind. Actually, no, it's out of frame. Anyway, it's right there,
In your hair?
and yeah, in my hair. And it's a beautiful guitar. It's been a workhorse for me for right at 20 years. And it just recently, well, in the past 6 years, I've become a Strat guy. For those of you who aren't familiar with the ASAT of GNL, it's basically a telly. It's a T-shaped object. But I've definitely become more of a Stratocaster player, but I still love a Telecaster. And for some gigs, it's just highly appropriate, country, etc. But it's just been one of those things where I've just kind of fallen out of love with it. It all happens. We buy and sell gear and we like things and it's been with me for a long time. So there's a little bit uh of an accrual, is that a word, of sentimental value. And but recently I've just kind of like decided to pull the trigger to get a telly that I really, really want. And I was like, well, I can sell the GNL, you know. And it's taken me a few years to come to that conclusion. And as soon as I convinced myself, all right, sell it, get the telly that you want. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with the GNL. It's a fantastic guitar.
It
Uh,
is a
yeah, I mean, like
wonderful
it
guitar.
really is. It's just one of those things where personally, it's not, for whatever reason, not gelling with me anymore. So I was like, all right, finally, I'm going to pull the trigger and do it. And then somebody sends me a news article, a couple of weeks ago that says Fender is buying GNL, and I think it said something like possibly just shelving it, you know? I think the word around the campfire for a few years now is, that's something that they would probably prefer to do. And I'm going to get all the facts mixed up on this, because I just don't follow this kind of thing. But, Fender would have to ask permission a lot of times to use, I think, Leo's name or something like that. And so, which I was kind of happy about because it's kind of like a little win for Leo, and so GNL was a company that started in 1980, I believe. And again, comments can correct me because again, I'm not a historian of this, but guitars by Leo, George and Leo, different people will say it different ways. But anyway, basically, however that happened, he got the rights to create, basically his guitars again, after he lost that to Fender. But I'll stop making factual errors trying to describe all that. But essentially, I think what's going to happen with this whole, buyout thing is that I think I'm going to be not stuck with, but I'm going to have now what's the equivalent of a pre-CBS corporate buyout of Fender, right? That because now there's possibly going to be no more GNLs made, right? So it just doesn't make sense for me to sell this guitar.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, I guess I'm gonna hold on to it, But that's news, both in the news and my news.
So, on the one hand, you have something that will increase in value potentially, very
Right.
likely. But on the other hand, that keeps you away from getting something else.
Yeah, soon, or or I'll just probably have to be more realistic about my budget.
Yeah.
Because that was just going to help me, at least get halfway or more to the thing that I would really want.
Yeah.
Uh, or I can just be patient and
We at Pluck
save.
We at Pluck That like to recommend to our viewers and listeners the one in, one out policy, especially if you suffer from gear acquisition syndrome.
The one in, one out policy, and let's keep it clean here, guys. Um, has kept me out of trouble for most of my adult life. You know, you slowly, when especially when you're younger, you accrue a lot of gear that your parents help you buy, your whatever, and so it's a naturally you just and then you start to buy your own stuff, of course, and everything, and so you end up with a lot of stuff, and then as Boyd can attest to, it sometimes you sell two things to get one, right? And it's just it's all relative, and yeah, this is no different. But yeah, on a side note, for sure, don't get me wrong. Every now and then, I just outright buy something, right? That's of substantial cost. But for the most part, I really try to stick to the if I buy something, I tend to want to let something go.
You like a happy marriage.
Exactly. It's really served me well.
I get it. I get it.
Also made me resourceful, for myself and my students, because and this is a serious point because we've talked about gear before. We will talk about it again for students. As guitarists, we're really lucky. We can get really great gear that professionals use, So as in like, you tell your students, hey, you can totally make the gig happen with this gear. You can go a long way. No, you can get well beyond an entry level piece of equipment that will, carry you through adulthood that, your heroes play on, that make a living on, that we make a living on,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just that to me, it's just a challenge and it's a way to be resourceful and it's a way to remind yourself to be thankful that, we play the instrument that we do. So
Well
Amen.
said.
Amen. Well, I got a bit of news as well, boys. And this is something that I think is important for me to share and kind of be in a bit of a vulnerable space because it talks about something that I've experienced in my journey on the guitar more recently. And I think maybe other people who are listening, especially students or professionals alike, may be able to, they may have something in common with or may have also experienced this. So, okay, when you read music, you're looking at paper or you're looking at a screen. And in recent times, a lot of people are looking at screens, most commonly some type of a tablet or iPad or something like that. In about 2020, 2021, I bought an iPad and transformed my reading experience from paper to screen. And it was amazing because I was able to categorize all my music on the tablet. I was able to mark up things, color code, erase, um, email, text things back and forth, download. It's been quite a revelation in terms of reading music as a professional. But it's had a bit of a downside, and I kind of have broken free from the grip of one of those downsides recently. And so that's my news this week. Basically, I got into the habit of warming up. I warm up every day. It's really important for me to have about a 20 to 30-minute warm up, but warming up in front of the iPad. So turning it on, putting something up, and warming up to whatever that is. Now, it's not just anything, it happened to be the news. So just turning on various news sites or Google News, but it just kind of became a habit of mine to turn on the news. I even used my Bluetooth page turning device to scroll as I was continuing to play. I got pretty good at it, but every day, like as if I were addicted, and maybe I even was, to reading the news while warming up. Scales, arpeggios, chords, whatever I was doing, it was while watching and reading, consuming the news. I thought it was harmless. I thought it was multitasking. I'm a very busy person from teaching to performing to family life and so on. And I thought, hey, I could check the news, maybe even look at email, and get some things done two at the same time. But it became such a solid habit and possibly an addiction that it went on for years. Like I said, I got the iPad in like 5 years ago or so. So recently I realized that this was a very bad thing. And I tried playing without the iPad about a week ago, and I heard some things in my playing that I did not like. Okay. Like flaws here and there in my sound, in my technique, some things that have started to kind of slip through the cracks. One of the things I tell my students is technique is a garden. Weeds will grow and you have to kind of constantly go back to it and tend it. Well, weeds had grown and I just didn't notice because I was distracted by the use of the screen. And so that was like the downside of, playing without the iPad. It was a negative experience, but it was also sobering because I was able to really hear the things that needed to be improved. But a wonderful thing happened as well. Without the iPad, I was listening to myself playing. I was having fun again. I felt reconnected. It was like a joyful experience all over again. And I felt refreshed after warming up and like ready to continue. And it occurred to me in this whole experience that warming up while doing something else, especially reading the news, depleted me. I used a lot of attention span on it. Reading the news, it depressed me because, you know, the news is always depressing, especially recently. It's been bad for quite a while now. And I felt exhausted even before I started like the next practice session. Like the warm up was always just sort of like the first thing, like, okay, let's get the warm up done and then let's get to work. Well, it got to a point where the warm up was so momentous because of my brain just being fried by everything that it was hard to practice after that. So I have been playing without the iPad in front of me for about, I don't know, 8 or 9 days. And it's been amazing. Sometimes I get tempted. Sometimes I find myself automatically turning it on and not even thinking about it. That's why how I know that it's like really, it's really kind of ingrained. But it's been fascinating to go through this process. Again, I say this because other people who are listening may have experienced this. I've heard of other people who like to practice in front of the TV or YouTube or whatever, never thinking I was going to be like that. But here I am, and I lament the time that I've lost. This has been kind of a bittersweet moment for me because I think about all those hours not listening to myself play. I'm a freaking musician, and I wasn't listening, right? So anyway, I share this as a cautionary tale in case any of our viewers or listeners are dabbling in this or thinking about this or don't think it's harmful. My strongest recommendation is to just don't do it. Just play your guitar and yeah. Mike?
I can totally relate to that. And Nick, you may remember a number of years ago, I had said something about this. Much like you, I mean, life happens. We get busy. I need to grab practice time where I can, and was afforded, and I still am afforded the opportunity to sometimes steal some practice, at work, get a few things done. The only problem is it also has to do with the environment we're in. I'm still very kind of focused at that moment on my day job. And I would get through, playing a piece. I'm just going to run through something just to make sure it's there. And would find myself turning around and looking at my computer screen to see if an email popped up. And if it did, I need to address that right then, message a student or do something I needed to do. It was not good for my focus on my practicing. And Lord forbid if I was learning something, you play through 4 measures just to start doing something, and every 4 measures turn around, just double check every 15 seconds. It was not good focused practice time, and oftentimes it's still not. It's just the environment I'm in. I'm very grateful that when I moved into this house a number of years ago that we had some extra space, and this guest bedroom became my studio. And except for the podcast here, or if I'm, reading off the, screen, playing with something, my phone, my, tablet is not allowed up here unless it's literally, something I need to use for my practice. And it has given me much greater focus up here. And I'm thankful for that because it was a realization that something negative in my approach to playing had worked its way in and become habit. And for a long time, probably years, I didn't realize it was really bringing down the level of, what I could do. So much like the great Frank Zappa said, just shut up and play your guitar.
I'll give another amen to that. All right. Well, that was a nice little news segment. Wanted to just say a few words about our guest. We have Joshia de Jonge, as mentioned before, just a fantastic builder of classical guitars. And we are just so honored to be able to have some time to ask her a few questions, learn about her guitars and her craft. Joshia de Jonge. All right. We are here with Joshia de Jonge. I would like to first say thank you, Joshia, for being with us for this podcast. You're actually our first luthier, so we're pretty honored about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for having me.
There's actually a bit of an interesting Venn diagram that brings me to you because so I teach at the University of Southern Mississippi, and my predecessor, his name is John de Chiaro, and John de Chiaro has had a relationship with your father over the years, and even members of your guitar making family, such that individuals who are here with us this evening and who also went through the program purchased guitars, de Jonge guitars.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm good friends with Patrick Sutton,
Yeah.
who's a wonderful player and is in Memphis and recently purchased one of your guitars and just speaks so highly of it. He really, really loves it. And so those were just a few of the reasons why we were really excited to talk with you on this episode. So thank you very much.
Yeah. No, thanks. Yeah.
So wanted to just kind of start by seeing if you can give us a bit of a rundown of like the family tree of guitar builders, maybe starting with your dad and going to you and your siblings and maybe even beyond.
Yeah. Well, my dad and then my dad learned from Jean Lervet as well. So, and I actually worked in Jean Lervet's shop as well when I was 17 for just for a couple of months, like learning inlay and whatnot. But yeah, I learned from my dad. Started kind of my first guitar when I was 13, but like had been in my dad's shop like as a kid, like sanding blocks of wood, just kind of playing around in there. My brother and I, actually my younger brother, there's three younger brothers and the one like right after me. He started building when he was 8, I think 8 or 9, and I was 13 at the time, and he started building a guitar, and that is kind of like I got jealous and was like, how come he's doing that and not me? So then we kind of started together. He built a little kind of, it's almost like a ukulele, but not a real ukulele, like a little mini guitar. And then he and I started kind of our first real guitars, although they were alto guitars, so they were kind of smaller. My dad, I guess, thought since we were like young, we should build little guitars. At the time, he was making a lot of guitars for guitar orchestras in Japan, and he was had a fair bit of alto guitar orders. Anyway, so we started with these smaller guitars, and he and I built, like my brother and I built those guitars side by side. Although that one took me about 3 years. I was like in school and, whatever, and would work on it here and there. But yeah, that's where it started. All of my brothers now, they all did build. None of them are building professionally anymore. My kids also both have taken my dad's guitar course and built with him, but they're 19 and almost 22, the older one now. But yeah, neither of them are building either.
Right on. So you've been at it since a young age. In fact, I read the story about, I guess we could call it your debut. At it seemed like a rather impressive moment when they presented a guitar that was evaluated by a sort of a panel of luthiers at an important luthiers conference and they celebrated the instrument, and then it was revealed that it was yours. And
Yeah. Yeah, that was in 98 in Tacoma at the like Guild of American Lutherie convention. And they had like silent listening sessions there where all the luthiers would go and bring their guitars and they would like get played and the same piece played on each guitar so you could kind of compare and they would be played and then the luthier would be revealed after and they'd like play the guitar and then the luthier would stand up and talk about it a bit and yeah, so when my guitar got played it kind of got a standing ovation and clapped for before I stood up as kind of the luthiers there. Among them were like Geza Burkhart, Elliot, yeah, I'm forgetting my names right now, Jeffrey Elliott and Greg Byers, people like that. And so the whole audience kind of decided they liked my guitar the best before I had stood up. And yeah, then I stood up and yeah, it was pretty awesome for sure, pretty
yeah,
exciting. Yeah.
that's incredible. One of the things that I was struck by in that story was that you mentioned something about using your family's lattice bracing. That kind of made me think that you invented the lattice bracing, or was I led astray?
It was my dad had been doing it with, he had been learning, he learned from Jean Lerve, but he also worked with a fellow named Pat Lister, who I don't think is really known that much now, but he was, I guess, earlier. I guess this is the early 80s. You'd have to confirm things with him, but he was working with Pat Lister, who had been previously had been an aircraft engineer. So his approach to guitar making, that's where lattice and building guitars as light as possible with as much strength as possible and, as much volume. So he kind of was coming at it from that, yeah, that perspective. And my dad, I mean, he always is experimenting. He's still experimenting with guitars. He's in his 70s and still kind of trying new stuff all the time with guitars. But anyway, he had been trying out various lattice bracings at the time, and I had been doing a fairly standard kind of Ramirez, like traditional Spanish type bracing back then. And he, like, I guess not that many years because I was pretty young and hadn't been building that long yet, but he would have various lattice patterns going and like every time would be like, check this out. And I was always kind of like, yeah, like it's cool, but looks overcomplicated and like a lot of work, frankly, as well, fitting all the pieces. Anyway, the one on that guitar we call kind of in my dad's shop the 2-inch lattice. Just that pattern when my dad came up with that. My brother was involved too, Sagan. That one I was like, that's really cool, and I really liked it. So that it was a zero Cody guitar. I did that for the first time. That was my first lattice, and I brought it to that show, and that was the one that yeah stood out. And all the makers after were asking about the pattern, and I think a lot of makers got more into lattice then than before. Although I know Australian makers were also experimenting with lattice at the
Okay.
time.
What year was this show again?
98.
I have a 2001 guitar built by Sagan,
Oh, cool.
and I was just kind of curious. It's number 26. We were just talking about it.
Cool.
But,
Lift it up, Ass. You got it?
I'm not
I
sure I
do
can.
have, of course, I have.
I see one person, but oh, there we go. Okay, sorry. Can I see it again? Cool.
Yeah, it's the back and sides are like
Oh,
almost black. It's just
that,
really it's beautiful.
that must be ebony, I think.
Yeah, I would guess so. Yeah,
Can
it's
I
been
see the label? Sorry. Just want to check it out. Yeah,
I don't know if I can see
yeah, the light is,
pretty tough.
yeah, it's kind of blurry.
We're
Anyway,
almost
that's,
there.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I see it. That's awesome.
Thanks, Vass.
Cool. That's funny. I don't remember him. I mean, not that I would remember every guitar he built, but it's must be ebony. I just didn't know he really built ebony guitars. Either that or Brazilian. Sorry, can I see the back again? It's kind of it's hard to see the grain. Hmm.
It's
Cool.
really nice. It's
Yeah.
I was under the impression that the back and sides were a type of rosewood that
It's
like I said,
probably Brazilian then. I don't
yeah.
recall, like I built a lot of ebony, but Sagan didn't was always pretty into Brazilian, but it could be African blackwood actually,
Ooh,
which
yeah, maybe
which
so.
is also in the rosewood family. I bet it's that. Anyway, I'd have to see it in person or number 26. I'll ask Sagan if he remembers next time we
Okay.
talk.
Yeah, yeah, I think of the four that came through the school when I was there, yeah, I mean the back and sides of this one was always my favorite, it's really
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, it's
yeah,
just how dark it was, and I'd never
yeah.
really seen a color like that. But yeah, this has been with me since '02, I guess. And
Awesome.
yeah, it's been great.
Came through the school, which school? Like the guitar came through the school?
Oh no, it's like Nick was mentioning earlier. I was in music school under John De Chiaro at the
Oh,
time,
right. Yeah.
and right there were four students there at the time. I think before I left that ended up buying from your family.
Cool. Yeah, I'll tell Sagan about it.
I had a couple of questions about your specific designs. The neck twist is one of the things that I wanted to talk about. I mean, you could probably describe it in the best way, but it seems like you have, instead of a perfectly symmetrical neck, a bit of
Yeah.
a bit of a turn to it to make it more playable.
Yeah, totally. I'll go to that. I just wanted to go back to the lattice for a second. The lattice I'm
Sure.
doing is based on that 2-inch lattice, but it's evolved a fair bit since that 98 guitar. Anyway, it's still a pattern kind of based on that, but yeah. And yeah, onto the neck twist. That is, I don't know if you know the maker Eric Celine. He's an American maker. So my dad took my brother Sagan and I on a trip around that age. Actually, it might have been even before that. We did a trip across the US and we stopped at various guitar makers, like at Richard Brunet, yeah, kind of various guitar makers and guitar dealers. And we stopped at Eric Celine's shop and he was doing that twist. I believe, as far as I know, he's the one who invented it. My dad at the time was doing the twist, like, and so were Sagan and I, but just in the fingerboard. So it was just like the neck was straight and like when the guitar was getting fret, just the fingerboard, it was kind of plain, so like thinner on the two opposite sides. Anyway, Eric Celine was doing that twist in the neck. And so after that trip, we all started doing it like as well in the neck, my dad and my brothers. I think my dad has actually gone back and he's not doing it in the neck anymore, although who knows, he changes, every week I can go visit him and he'll be doing things differently. But yeah, so that's where the idea came from. And it's kind of like if you imagine like a helicopter propeller, it's kind of like that. So it's twisted, and if you look at the neck, it looks almost like it's wonky, like twisted to the guitar. But yeah, it's got a twist, but then along the fretboard, every string is straight, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like, yeah, follows this kind of twist line, but then is straight on each of the strings. Like if you held a straight edge, it's a real hassle to
Yeah.
plane into the fingerboards. But yeah,
How,
but
how do you compensate for, or do you have to for intonation, like on the bridge or something, or
I mean, that doesn't
what about
really change the length, you know.
okay,
So you're still, I mean, the saddle has an angle in it but that doesn't, we like the saddle is put in the right spot and it's got an angle and like, you can contour I mean, they're all in the same way. So now I know, the saddle is made like this, so it ends up being the right length on
okay,
each string. But yeah, that doesn't really change that because you're not changing the length.
okay? Yeah, I guess I was thinking maybe the pressure would be different. You know what I mean? Like as you press down in some places, you would actually have to go a little further. Like the action would be.
Yeah, well, maybe the action more. I could see what you mean, but yeah, it's still like when the action's adjusted, like you just measure it from the fret the same way. It doesn't.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Um, what about your bridge? Is there anything about the design that, you've any kind of a development or something that you could speak about that is important to you about the way your guitar sounds that comes from the bridge?
Yes, for sure, but it's a fairly traditional bridge. I mean, the saddle slot is like routed in. It's not the full length, which is more traditional. Like it's kind of fit in, which that was stuff my dad was doing. Although he's doing kind of, I don't know if that bridge actually, Sagan's guitar probably has one of my dad's bridges. I don't know if
Hmm.
it has the traditional, I didn't see just now, or kind
Yeah.
of the I kind of think of it as a spaceship. Yeah, so that's like my dad's style bridge with the scooped out. I was doing that at that time, but now I'm doing a pretty traditional, like, with the straight, your kind of regular traditional bridge and like have my weights and my lengths. But it's my version of a pretty standard one. Like everyone's traditional bridges will have different lengths or widths, but I'm like in the pretty similar. Yeah.
Yeah. And I notice sound ports are big and small and different designs and that kind of thing. Yours are on the kind of smaller size.
Yeah, they started bigger and then they've been kind of shrinking to the size I like. They also have, I laminate my sides and then I put kind of a thicker laminate right on the sound port where there's some magnets embedded into the sides so that I have a cover that's magnetic. And when I started doing that, it was kind of like a natural Turnavos, like it with the sides being thickened up there. And I felt like just doing that, like at first I was just putting sound ports and no covers, or I had various covers that were plugs or, before the magnetic cover. But once I started doing the magnetic one, the like how I constructed it with not wanting the magnets to show. I know some makers just have magnets on there and you can kind of see them. If you look in, I wanted them to be kind of fused in place and unable. I know there's been issues with like if the glue comes loose with those super strong rare earth magnets, they can jump to each other. So I wanted them really fitted in place. Anyway, that made kind of like a thickness to the sound port area that was like a Tornavos, and I liked the sound better just adding that. And that's part of what inspired me to start doing Tornavoses on the like the sound holes as well. Patrick's guitar has a Tornavos. A lot of my guitars
Oh, really?
don't. Anyway.
Can you explain for our listeners what that is?
So it's like not a very long tube, but kind of like a speaker. You know how I'm not great at explaining these kind of things, but like you know how speakers have like kind of a cone or whatever.
Mhm. Yes.
Anyway, kind of like that. So it's just about an inch thick kind of wooden circle, really, that just adds some depth. And I've never been great at describing sound. I just know I liked the guitars better once I started doing that. And also, like, I would take the guitars to, well, my friend Drew Henderson in Toronto. I can sometimes give him guitars to try before they go out in the world. And he's such a great player, good to get his advice. And that first one I did with the Tornavos that he tried, he was definitely like, noticed the difference. So, but I guess, yeah, a lot of how I test sound is having people play my guitars at shows or like get their feedback and find out what they like, what they don't, what's working. And
And you've
yeah.
talked about, lattice bracing and sound ports and things that have been around for a few decades, but the Tornavos is really old, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's super old, but then nobody was really doing it. And now I think it's kind of becoming fairly popular. A lot of makers are doing it.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your double top?
Yeah, the double top is really based on Wagner, like Gernot Wagner in Germany. Like I know Daman was doing it, or Daman is the one, the one who came up with the idea. But Wagner came up with the idea to use Nomex. My dad had been experimenting with that for years too. And again, he was doing various versions that I wasn't as into. But yeah, really, I got an order for one and talked to Garno and got a lot of advice from him and also from Dennis Toltz. Those were kind of the makers that were doing it that I kind of really was drawn to their way of doing it. So it's a Nomex, like Nomex core. Are you familiar with Nomex? It's like a kind of like a Kevlar material or like a super thin, it looks like honeycomb. But so it's always cedar on the inside, like the inner layer that I'll do, and then spruce or cedar on the outside, depending on what the person wants for the guitar. and yeah, Nomex core. I can show you. Can really see this is kind of,
Oh, perfect.
yeah, like I'm actually doing it differently than this now. I've cut it off here, so it's only kind of the vibrating area because I have a bar here. So this whole area I'm keeping solid
Oh,
now.
why is
Uh,
that?
just because this part of the top, like I have a solid bar here, this part isn't really vibrating. Like it's not really, this is the part that's moving.
Yeah.
So it's kind of not really necessary for the sound and nicer to have this area solid because it's super like you can't really see, but it's just over half a millimeter thick. So it's super delicate. So anywhere I can have it not delicate like that makes it easier. It also makes it easier in finishing. I can grab the guitar here, whereas like if you grabbed it here too hard, you could poke
Yeah.
through, or like one little dent would be, yeah,
Yeah.
not not good for the guitar. So it's just makes it a bit it makes it a bit more sturdy without hurting the sound.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah.
I wanted to talk about some topics related to being on the other side of the guitar, if you will. So we're players. We talk
Mm.
about guitars. We talk about builders. We talk about things we want in sound. And there are always trends and demands and things that we want out of it. What's it like being on the other side of that? For example, there's been like a volume war that's been going on for, 20, 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, what are your thoughts on that? I'm really curious to hear the other side of this.
I've never really like I know there's a volume war. That's never been my thing. Like I don't want to sacrifice tone for volume. I'm much more about the tone. Like yes, sure, some volume too is nice, but I mean a lot of people are miking anyway. I'm much more about the tone really, and yeah, I'm not involved in the volume war at all. And that's I think why I stayed away from double tops for so long. I knew they were louder, but there was qualities I didn't like as much in them, although there's a lot of double tops out there I now really, yeah, love. And I don't know that I would say I prefer a double top, but I do really like it. It is a more delicate guitar to care for. And I don't know if the life of it will be as long as a single top. It's, kind of too early to tell for my guitars anyway. Give it 100 years and later generations will be able to tell. But yeah, it's never really been my thing that like I hear people talking about it, but yeah, it's more about the tone for me for sure. And the craft of details. I'm pretty into details and I build a lot less guitars and go a lot slower than a lot of luthiers. I really like taking my time and working on one instrument at a time. And yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful because for me, at least, I can't speak for my colleagues here, but of course, the tone is the most important thing. But
Mhm.
the guitar is just inherently so quiet, and the temptation to have something that's
Yeah.
louder is so great that it's hard not to ignore it.
Yeah, I guess if you're wanting to play in an orchestra with a guitar and you're not wanting to mic it, that's a trick. But I don't know. It's kind of not what the instrument is, like not that it couldn't be in an orchestra or maybe we can put a bow on it or something, but like I don't know. That's yeah, not where like me trying to get it as loud as a violin or something. It's not that it's not great that other people are trying stuff like that, but it's kind of not my goal for it. For me, it's more like, yeah, making a beautiful instrument that someone can sit in a room with and just like enjoy. And I mean the same, like if you're sitting in a big room and the player is fantastic, it can fill a room and nothing wrong with miking it a bit, I think, too.
For sure. And it's also tough when you're in a competition environment
Hmm.
and you hear like, 5 to 10 people in a row and one or two are somehow louder than the others. You're not exactly sure how. Everyone starts asking them, "Oh, what kind of guitar do you play? You must have a
Yeah.
good guitar because it's loud." And then
Yeah.
there's like this vicious cycle of competitors, or at least young players, focusing on that over other things.
Yeah. Have you ever heard a Hillhurst guitar? Jeroen Hillhurst. He's a Dutch maker.
No.
Anyway, his guitars for sure, like years of going to GFA. I haven't seen him in a while now, and I'm not sure if he's going, but his guitars for sure were 5 times as loud as every other guitar there. And if you've ever held one, it's like a tank. Like he reinforces his back and sides like nothing I've ever seen. But yeah, I guess, there's so many great guitars, there's so many different ways of building, and there's so many different things you can focus on to make it better. That's not, the one that like I don't try and compete with that one. It's just not my goal.
You mentioned back and sides when we were looking at your brother's guitar earlier.
Mhm.
And it got me thinking about, well, first of all, I'm blown away that ebony can be used as a back and side. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it kind of, I would say, was never used and shouldn't have been used. I did build an ebony guitar in the 90s, um, and there's a lot of issues with it. So hygroscopic, it moves so much and can crack so much. I mean, so can Brazilian and so can Cocobolo. I've started laminating back and sides. It actually started with African blackwood because it's so heavy, like the wood is so dense. And I'm not against heavy guitars, but overly heavy is like can be uncomfortable. So I started laminating the African blackwood guitars I was building with Spanish cedar. And then I guess had some other wood like that I ended up laminating as well with Spanish cedar. And anyway, long story short, I just found laminating gave an edge to the guitars as well. Like it's like um, stabilizing or solidifying, like making the back and sides more rigid and not necessarily heavier. I liked something about the sound of that in the Spanish cedar. And then it also has the benefit of avoiding like any cracks or any checks. Like even if you get a hairline check in some Brazilian, when it's laminated, it's not gonna really go anywhere or split right into the guitar. I mean, anything can happen, but generally not. And I found then it was safe to use ebony once I'm laminating because it stops. That's a big risk with ebony. The trees aren't that big, the wood moves so much, and yeah, it's prone to checking and cracking, but with laminating, it I wouldn't say it's still not an issue. Wood will move, depends what environment it lives in and what it goes through. But if a hairline crack develops and doesn't go far, it's an easy repair. And yeah, and I really love ebony. It's beautiful. There's so much variety of different colors, and it's right now anyway, not an issue for taking across borders, and like the paperwork isn't like Brazilian or, that kind of thing. So yeah, I've been using it a fair bit. Yeah.
well, so this may sound like kind of a dumb question, but how influential are the woods on the back and sides?
Yeah, very, but there's a lot of woods that you can make a great guitar with, and you could even, use woods that theoretically wouldn't work for back and sides and the way you built it, you could, I think if you have a stable kind of pretty rigid back and sides, not overly rigid with a nice top that can move. You can make a pretty great guitar. Like you can change thicknesses of bracing of the woods and kind of get the guitar to move in a similar way, like get the back and sides to a similar, or more the back, similar frequency that you would with, you know, a denser wood by thinning it. So you can make pretty great guitars from a lot of wood if you know what you're doing, but it's definitely easier with, you use the rosewoods, the kind of standard ones, those densities, and use spruces or cedars for the tops, redwoods. But yeah, so it all affects it quite a bit, I would say. But you can achieve similar results changing thicknesses and yeah.
Yeah, you could really screw up a guitar with a poorly treated spruce top. It really depends on the technique is your point. in addition
Sure,
to the
if you
words.
if you made it half an inch that or like,
Right.
or made it too thin and underbraced it, might sound great for a couple hours and then, you know, split apart. You can get away with a lot more, I'm realizing, like over the years, like the tolerances you can push, you
Yeah.
know, and especially with people, I don't have a CNC, but a lot of people have CNCs, you can do things, that weren't really so possible 100 years ago or yeah.
Yeah.
I
Um,
like the endorsement of laminate, back in size and everything. If it's just conventional wisdom, if you just go into any,
Yeah.
guitar shop or talk to anyone who's, looking for be it a steel string or whatever, you're going to hear them say, "Oh, it's solid back and sides." It's
Yeah.
like it's a,
Yeah.
it
No,
automatically makes it just, great, but it's like, no, it really, there's more to it than that.
yeah, no, I know there's that, like, with cheaper guitars being laminated, but it's not like plywood. Like I'm using quality,
Right.
and I'm laminating with the grain too, not making it cross grain like plywood and using Spanish cedar, which I love kind of all the qualities of Spanish cedar for that. I love the color, I love the smell, and I love the weight, the density, and it's kind of the perfect wood for me for that. The trick with it is it's hard to get it in bigger pieces, so you end up usually making a three-piece back or something like that, which doesn't really bother me. I also like it. It's staggering, like the back is always a center seam. So the chunk of Spanish cedar I put in the middle is spanning that whole seam, kind of like, how a center strip that you see on most backs, like but in like the Spanish cedar, it's one big wide piece. I also like with laminating, I'm not putting center strips, so you don't have to fit the braces. Like the braces can all just go either notch out the center strip or put notches in the braces, if you know what I'm.
Yes, I think I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I now even like a perfect Indian rosewood back, if I had, what I do have, I would still laminate it because I prefer the sound I get, even though it's like not really necessary. I also think potentially can last longer. Of course, we don't know, like I'm using modern urethane glues for that. So those haven't stood the test of time. So, I think it'll last longer than it would not laminated. But that, like hide glues are known that they stand like the old glues, but so there's things like that. Mind you, I think all guitars sooner or later need some repair work and TLC. So,
Right.
Hope you don't mind me jumping back just a
right.
second when you touched on, some makers using CNC machines now. I remember there was a bit of a, I don't want to say trend, but there were some makers I remember in the, mid to late 90s who were really kind of shooing, any kind of power tools. It was kind of their signature to, stay all, hand carved and things like that, and which seems a bit of a rarity. But when I played some of those instruments, even one by the same maker, you almost think with what they're implying that they have, better consistency maybe with those methods. And I found that wasn't necessarily the
Hmm.
case. And seeing that now some people are, adopting, CNC, I was just curious, how prevalent you think that is, and if there are other advantages, when it comes to consistency or things like that with the use of that.
So you're saying like makers that have CNCs potentially could be more consistent, like across their
Well,
product.
that's just the question. I don't know if
Yeah.
that is true or not. If there's still an inherent, inconsistency that, can
Yeah,
be.
I don't think it has as much to do with the CNC as it does with the builder.
Mm.
Some builders kind of build very like methodically and take a lot of notes and, you know, do things kind of similarly. Some tend to like experiment and change and try new things. So having a CNC or not, like yes, you could, make sure the fingerboard is cut the same more easily. But jigs, like jigs, for example, for cutting a fingerboard, it's still pretty accurate. Maybe not the same as the CNC. But I just anyway, to overall answer your question, I think it's a lot more the builder, not which jigs they have, because you can do you can change the settings or you can change all the stuff. It's more how they build and if they want to be like if they want to be building the same thing or if they want to experiment and try, like for example, if you gave my dad a CNC, not that he's not consistent, but his passion is in experimenting and pushing and like trying new things. So the CNC wouldn't make him more consistent if he didn't feel like being consistent. Yeah.
Right. Just a second ago, you mentioned TLC. So I had a question
Mhm.
about that. Um, does refinishing affect the sound?
Of course. Yeah,
So what does it
sure.
do? Does it close it
Well,
up or
I mean, that's also like hard to just give one answer. It really depends. Like, are you stripping all the finish and putting a whole new finish? Are you changing it from lacquer to shellac to like a UV cure? Or, like so yes, it changes it, but or are you just doing a touch up? Like, have you got a little check here and you're, putting in some CA, some zap, as we call it in my shop, the crazy glue and just doing a little touch up. A little touch up on finish here or there isn't gonna really, especially if you're, it's French polish and you're just, I mean, yes, there might be a very, very slight change to the sound that probably nobody could detect, but a machine. But if you're stripping off a full, and redoing it, then yeah, 100%. But to say how is it depends on the finish, depends on how thick or thin or what changes you do, or if you end up sanding the actual wood as well.
yeah,
But yeah.
anything that you would recommend we do better as guitarists to maintain our
Um,
guitars?
I mean, care of the guitar, watching humidities, like both watching over humidifying and under, the regular stuff, not leaving it in a hot or cold car, like Um, but yeah, humidity for sure is a big one, but also not over humidifying. Um, I mean, yeah, it depends. Some people too, like just finish can get, just playing it. I don't know. That's a tricky one without knowing the specific, But yeah, mostly the obvious things, I guess. I guess the biggest one is like humidity changes. Yeah.
Speaking of all this TLC and upkeep and craftsmanship, uh, can would you like to talk about your courses that you offer? Are you still offering them?
I'm not right now, but yeah,
No.
my husband and I were teaching courses. It was a 6-week course and we were just taking two students. I'm not sure if you can kind of see my shop, but a pretty small shop. Um, but yeah, we're not now. I'm not sure if we will again down the line. It was fun. It was fun to do for sure, but yeah, not, not now. My husband's working full-time programming, so but also the course, I did enjoy it. I taught for years with my dad too. So we did it, started doing it a few years ago and only did it for a few years. And it was fun to do, but a lot of stress. It's different in my dad's shop when I was helping teach and it's kind of under his, umbrella. But just the stress of, keeping people safe, like not wanting anyone to lose fingers on it, especially if someone hasn't really used a table saw or routers or, that kind of stuff. It was a lot of pressure that was like, I don't know, I want to keep doing that responsibility. And also it was great. And now I'm kind of happy to have my shop back for myself and kind of focus on some like more detailed, longer term projects, kind of. So. We'll see. I'll never say never, but it's not in the plans for the near future, for sure.
Um, so a long time ago, one of my former guitar teachers told me that if you have someone who really plays a guitar, really digs in, that they're going to break in a guitar more quickly than somebody who doesn't. Do you happen to know anything about that?
100%, I agree with that. Like the way the guitar is played affects like how the guitar sounds and who plays it. And over the years, my brother worked in a guitar store in Tokyo, Blue G. for a few years, and he would talk about like they had steel strings, but like old Martins and like pre-war Martins, things like that. And he told me they had a guy that would come in, and the guitars would be sitting sometimes not played for a while, and he would like tune them up and kind of play them. I don't know how often he came, but I remember him saying that like at first you wouldn't necessarily, the guitar wouldn't sound that great. And then like as the guy played it for longer, just it opening up. And I'm not sure if that necessarily relates to your question, but just for sure, when I get a guitar back for a repair or something, it's like a different guitar. Yeah, the way the person plays it. And yeah, it's like you can almost tell if a guitar has been timidly played and never really broken in. Like for sure you can. I feel like as not really a player, like I can play very little, but barely enough to kind of test my guitars. But I feel like understanding that, like I remember hearing that kind of thing, but really understanding it. I don't know when it switches, but yeah, you can feel it kind of when you hold the guitar and when you try it, you can feel that it's, yeah. And I'm sure people who really play guitar can tell that a lot more. As I can like get a bunch of things from just holding a guitar and looking at a player who's been doing it for so long can, yeah, feel those things from a guitar for sure.
It's kind of timely this subject would come up. I remember way back in the day, several people I talked to said, oh, when they first get an acoustic guitar of any style, they like to set it up when they're not playing it and just blast music, so it's vibrating and resonating, and do
Yeah.
that for a couple of weeks. And I just saw that come up again recently on guitar.com or something like that. Is there anything to that?
Yes, yes, there is. And it's funny that it makes me think of Pat Lister, that fellow who my dad had worked with, the aircraft engineer. My dad said he had like a playing in machine. So he had the guitar suspended and he would have it just strum. He was, I think, one of the people working for Volume, and it would strum it like very aggressively. And I think he'd like put it in the playing in machine for like 24 hours. And my dad would talk about the difference like of a new guitar, like just doing that. For me, I think that's a bit aggressive, and it's kind of like getting a new car or a new anything. It's kind of nice for the person to get it, have it like be a baby and kind of get to play it in themselves and it grow with them their way, you know? But for sure, that kind of stuff does affect it. There were those, I think they were called tone generator pros, I think, and you would put it on the bridge. I'm sure they still exist, and it would vibrate the guitar. And I checked that out for a bit. Again, that kind of stuff isn't so much for me. I'd rather give it to the person and like let it be worked in by them and like grow with them. But yeah, there is something to all that stuff. And again, like I did never hear a guitar on the guitar playing in machine before and after, but my dad talked about that a lot and the difference it would make.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought it was a throwaway question, but it seems like it was a really fun one, a really
Yeah.
interesting one.
Yeah.
It really is, because that always seemed like, well, is there something to it or a bit of a wives' tale? And that really kind of, nails it right there. There's
Yeah.
really something to that. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Martins, and I remember seeing on the website your dad building steel strings. Do you mess with steel string construction at all?
Uh,
Or
I did. I've built, I'm not sure how many, maybe around five, not that many.
yeah,
And the last one was probably early 2000s. And I was already not really building them, but someone I knew ordered it. Um, but yeah, I did a bit early on, and then I kind of gravitated towards classicals. And yeah, pretty much now that's all. Yeah.
Is there much difference really in the technique between building, say, a steel string acoustic and a nylon string acoustic?
I mean, the woodworking skills are all there to cross over, but yeah, like to me, the build is like hugely different. I mean, they're still guitars, but yeah, it's quite different. And honing into like the detail I like to hone into to get to that in steel string is like a whole nother I don't know, like a whole nother. I feel like the same as a musician getting as kind of knowing how to play another instrument, even if it's similar as well. And for me, yeah, I kind of prefer staying on the one. But yeah, I mean, I could build a steel string fine, and I could also follow, builders I like, and I'm sure I could make a decent one. But then to find my own sound or my own what I want out of a guitar would take, a while, a decade, or I don't know, maybe not that long, but a while to kind of really find what was me with it or what I was into. So yeah.
Yeah, we discussed that a lot on just a guitar is not a guitar is not a guitar. It's like like what you said, everyone is every different style has its own character.
Yeah.
Sure you can,
Yeah.
I don't know, pick up a pick and play a classical or a steel string or an electric
Hmm.
or gypsy style guitar, but
Yeah.
it's they I don't know, they all have
Yeah.
something that they kind of want to do naturally,
Yeah.
and I think it's important to, like you say, stay focused on that
Yeah.
at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Excuse me, should we be on the lookout for any kind of a new development in your building or business or anything like that?
Um, as far as like the design, the inner workings, I mean, I have a few different things that I'm doing depending on if someone wants a double top or a single top or, sound port or not, or certain features. But I feel pretty good about where I am with the inner workings. Now I'm kind of getting into like more of the like outer aesthetics. Like I've got some, I've got a order for a guitar that I'll be designing kind of a whole new mosaic for. And so kind of getting into those aesthetic outer details, like dressing them up a bit. So no big inner working changes. I knock on wood, feel happy right now with where that's at. We'll see. You never know. It's often going to shows, you'll see other makers and get inspired by something and then, want to go home and try a version of it. But
Sure.
no big changes in that way right now, more on the outer part. So yeah.
Right on. Well, I think we have taken enough of your time
Yeah.
this on this
Yeah.
interview. We want to thank you very much for your time, Joshia de Jonge,
Yeah.
um,
Sure.
one of the world's preeminent classical guitar builders. And like I said before, we've known about your guitars and your family's guitars for quite a long time, and command quite a bit of respect. And so we're just really honored to have you this evening. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Awesome. No, thanks a lot. It was lots of fun. Yeah.
Well, that's another episode of Pluck That. We have some really great upcoming guests. I'd like to thank you for listening to us this time. I want to invite all our listeners and viewers to send questions for our upcoming guests. As always, you can always drop a comment in our YouTube videos or send an email to pluckthatguitarpodcast@gmail.com. Always welcome to hearing feedback as well. Thank you again for listening. See you next time.